Thanks for your patience, guys. Hey, welcome. Agile. Hey, here we are. Bosnia Agile, right? Second one. A tradition has already been started. How awesome is that? We should give a hand to our conference sponsors. This would not be possible without them, so let's do that. Thank you, guys. We know how hard it is to do conferences like this, so to have people like this help out to sponsor, it means the world. So thank you to them. My name is Jorgen Hesselberg. Jorgen, really, if you talk Norwegian, which is where I'm from. My first time in Bosnia, so I have to say, beautiful. I'm just really impressed by that. The people are awesome, the food is fantastic, the nature. Of course, it was raining all of my days here. I arrived on Tuesday. It was just raining, and of course, today that we're going to be all inside, it's beautiful outside, right? Isn't that typical? I was like, all right, cool. But it's okay, because what we're doing here is really important. And this topic I am really passionate about. I think it's something that matters to you as well. I think the intro here was really interesting, the whole idea of going beyond just the basics when it comes to Agile. But let's celebrate first, because in some sense, the war has been won. And I'm talking about the war against waterfall. I mean, that battle is kind of over by now. I mean, if you think about this, there's an old stat, I think it goes back to 2013. 80% of all IT projects are now Agile projects. That's a fact by now. My colleague was doing some research for his presentation earlier, and he found that, according to the State of Agile survey from version 1, 94% of all software projects inside of companies are now Agile. 94%, those are huge numbers. So, this is a good thing. We're happy about this. We're excited about this. And if you think about it, what's not to love? The Agile Manifesto, it's a beautiful thing. It covers these things that I think mean a lot to us as people and as professionals. I mean, individuals and interactions. We're talking about people here instead of tools. I mean, that's powerful. I mean, people make software, right? Working software over comprehensive documentation, actually creating value instead of just a bunch of documentation. How cool is that? Customer collaboration, actually having the customer be part of the process, not just handing stuff off. And then, of course, responding to change, being able to actually respond to change over time, not thinking you got all the answers up front, actually seeing what changes and then respond to it. That's very compelling. So you could see why that is powerful. You could see why that works. Now, I worked in a couple of companies, and a fairly large company that I joined that company just around here as things started going south. There's no correlation, by the way. It's not because I joined that this happened. At least I don't think so. The name of that company is Nokia. I joined that company just around 2008. And it was doing great. It had 40% market share of the smartphone market. It was doing awesome. You probably heard of the brand. You probably had a Nokia. Excellent phone. Well, we started going Agile just around here, around 2008. And I got to tell you, it was awesome. We went all in. We invested money, resources, people. It was awesome. Our bug count went down dramatically. Quality went up. People's engagement levels went up. Our speed to market went up dramatically. We used to spend 36 weeks to go from concept to cash. Now we could do it in 6 weeks. It was phenomenal. Yet, not a whole lot of change to the stock price. It kept going like this until in 2013 it was actually sold to Microsoft. So what happened there? We were Agile. We had awesome Agile teams. People were excited about what they were doing. It was meaningful work. What was going on? By the way, this is not just Nokia. These are the other companies that we compare ourselves to. 2008 was tough for everyone. Nokia never recovered. So it's not just, it was something specific about our company. Why didn't we make it? There are many stories like this. So I'm part of a number of different industry consortiums now where I get to talk to other people who are in my position, which is that I'm responsible for the Agile transformation of our company. We try to do these things. We help our executives. We help our teams. When I talk to them, and they say the same thing. There are many people that go through the same stuff. They say, it's kind of interesting. It's hard enough to do Scrum well. It's hard enough to do Kanban, to get people engaged, to get the executives on board. But to actually make a real change at the company level, it's hard. It takes a big effort. Something is missing. Something is missing. What can it be? We talked about that manifesto. It's a beautiful thing. The Manifesto for Agile Software Development. Software development. Maybe there's something here that goes beyond just what we talked about. Think of these guys. Happy fellows. They're mostly guys. I think there's a lady here somewhere. Firefighters, right? That's what we call them. Guess how much time these people spend fighting fires? As a percentage of their time. Think about how much time they spend fighting fires. It's about 2%. The rest of the time they do other things. Yet we call them firefighters. That label may not be very accurate to describe what they're actually doing. This is my point. Agile is a label that we've been using to describe how to do software development. I think what's starting to happen now is that Agile is evolving to mean more than what it was intended when these guys got together in 2001 in Utah and wrote the Agile Manifesto. I think that's the case. What we're also finding is that Agile is not the same as agility. Agility is what you want. You want to make sure your organization can actually work in an agile way. Being agile in itself doesn't make a whole lot of difference if the rest of the organization is not responding to change. That's what happened to Nokia. Think of you as this person here in red. The rest of the organization is waterfall, is plan-driven. And then you are that one team or that one person who's actually agile. How much of a difference are you going to make in your organization if that's the case? This is part of the problem we're facing today. We're seeing a lot of teams going agile, but the organization itself is not agile and needs to go beyond that. Management models has not kept up with the current realities. I think software has completely gotten there. I mean, agile software development, there's no other way to do that than an iterative way. We understand that now. But the management thinking has not kept up with software thinking. And Agile is silent on what it takes to go to the corporate level, to the executive level. Agile doesn't give us a lot of guidance on that. You've seen some frameworks out there. We all heard about those, but it takes a lot more than that. And that is my point. We need to look at other ways of thinking. We need to look beyond Kanban and lean startup and those basic things that we all talk about when we talk about Agile. We need to look beyond that and new thinking to see what we can do to actually make the whole organization agile and focus on agility, not just agile. And this is where we enter beyond budgeting. Have you heard about beyond budgeting before? Any of you? A couple of people? All right, I'm going to give you a demo or a short intro into what beyond budgeting is. I'll give you some resources into how you can get into it too. But this is one of those things that we as professionals need to look at that goes beyond agile so that we can spread agile in our organization, beyond just product management. These are the principles of beyond budgeting. This is kind of weird. This actually came up around 2001, which is the exact same time as the Agile Manifesto was written. People came up with a couple of what they call the beyond budgeting principles. And I'm not going to read the whole thing for you. The slides will be available so you can read it. But there's a couple of things I want to highlight. I think you'll see some similarities. Look at this, for instance, number 3, transparency. Promote open information for self-management. Don't restrict it hierarchically. So the idea is that you share information to everyone. You respect everyone's brains and not just say that since I'm the boss, I know all the answers. You share with everyone and make sure the organization overall can make decisions. Autonomy, number 5. Give teams the freedom and capability to act. Don't micromanage them. Isn't that interesting? Now we're talking about collaboration. We're talking about people not just telling people what to do. You're saying, let the teams decide the how. Yes, definitely be there and help define the why and the what, but let the teams decide the how. They know that better. Don't micromanage them. And look at this one here. Coordination, for instance. Coordinate interactions dynamically, not through annual planning cycles. Don't try to get all the answers up front. That's what beyond budgeting is about. And that's what they've been doing since 2001. So let's get concrete. Let me give an example of what beyond budgeting gives us. Think about this for a moment. why do we budget? Anyone here who's in the budgeting process? Who's setting budgets every year? Why do we do it? There's really just 3 reasons why we do it. Forecast, target, and resource allocation. Those are the 3 things. We need a forecast, we need to have a target to see where we're going to go, and we need to have people and resources to do those things. That's essentially the reasons why we have a budget. So, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with it is, it's the same number. That budget is one number, but it has conflicting purposes. Let me give you an example. Think about a forecast. So you're sitting there and I'm asking you, all right, give me your sales forecast for the next year. Oh, and by the way, while you come up with that number, if you don't hit that number, I'm going to punish you so you don't get a bonus. What do you think that's going to do to you when you try to come up with that number? You're probably going to put it down, right? Because you want to hit that, you want to get that bonus. Now, let's say I ask you about resource allocation. I say, how many people do you need next year? Oh, and by the way, while you think about that, whatever number you give me, I'm going to give you the same next year or maybe even less. You're going to try to get that number high, right? There's an inherent conflict in this same thing. It is all around that budget. So what we have to do, following things like beyond budgeting, is to separate those things. Separate the point of what these 3 things are trying to do. The target is what we want to happen. Talk about what we want. We're going to be realistic about that. Forecast is what we think can happen. It can actually be a little bit more conservative. And then the resource allocation itself is the people and processes and the resources we need to make it happen. As simple as that. So what do? We separate and we improve. We look at these 3 things and we say, this is not the same thing. There is one budget number, but we need to separate those. And what we do is we look at the target and we say, well, let's make the targets inspiring. Let's make them motivating. Let's make them relative. If you think about a target, imagine you're an oil company. Imagine your target has to do with revenue. What do you think is going to be the biggest thing that affects your revenue number? Oil price, right? Can you control the oil price if you're an oil company? You can't. So is it fair that I set a target for you 1 year in advance? You cannot control the oil price. Make it relative instead. Make it compared to other oil companies. They are dealing with the same constraints. That's one way Beyond Budgeting looks at this. How about the forecast? Try to make it unbiased. Look at what you're expecting this to become. Just enough details. Don't go into great granularity. You honestly don't know what's going to happen 1 year from now. And then, resource allocation. You know, if you think about a budget, it's almost like a bank, right? You go there, and once every year, you go there and you ask what's going to happen in the next year, and you ask the bank for some money. That's essentially what happens. So what about yourself? I mean, you'll go to the bank sometimes. What if you could only go to the bank once a year? Once a year you go to the bank, and you plan what you're going to do for the next year. It's kind of crazy, right? It's not realistic. This needs to be dynamic. You need to get the funds when you need them. You have to respond to change, make sure you change and get people when you need the people, rather than trying to look beyond an entire year and look at that. So that's another thing that Beyond Budgeting does to help with this. To get concrete, we get rid of traditional cost budgets. We actually think more about the flexibility and autonomy that's necessary in your people. Trust your people to actually be intelligent people. Give them some authority to make some decisions. What that means is that you look at relative KPIs, key performance indicators. Look at unit cost versus your peers, for instance. Look at unit cost based on input. Look at things like how are you doing compared to other companies in the same industry. Make it more relative rather than absolute. And if you don't have KPIs at all, go specific into targets. Say, well, we're trying to save money now on flights. Use teleconferencing. It's something very concrete. People can do that. What it requires, though, is that we need to have strong values. And we need to have a clear direction. And we're not going to monitor every single thing you do. We trust you to do the right thing. And you select what works best in your business. At the end of the day, what this is, it's a management model that is more responsive to change. It's actually thinking beyond the basic stuff of, I'm the guy, I'm going to set the budget, you're going to work within the budget. We're saying, you are the one who can work within relative constraints. compared to your peers and make the changes necessary. Responsive to change. Does that remind you of something? Right? You can see that this aligns. This is exactly the type of thinking that we need at the executive levels right now. Beyond budgeting in itself is not enough. You combine that with Agile. What we've been doing with Agile and software development is wonderful, but what we need to do is create a language for executives that they can understand, and that is beyond budgeting. You combine those two things, you get beyond Agile and you go beyond the traditional thinking that we have today, and you can actually make a difference outside of just those small areas and those small silos that we have today. That is the point of this. So let me give you some examples of what those organizations do, because it may sound interesting. It's like, okay, great, let's get concrete. What are some of the things that they do, those organizations that are beyond Agile? Well, here's one example. Vision, not hallucination. I mean, how many of you have been in companies where you say, okay, what's the most important thing? And the executives may have some PowerPoint and they'll talk about what the most important things are. Actually, I remember one time I went in to a company, I can't say the name of it, but they have what they call the big bets. And they said, we have 4 big bets. I'm like, great, that's energizing. I can get behind this. And as an Agile coach, I would talk to my team and I'd say, all right, which of the big bets are you betting on? What are you working on? Like, nothing to do with that. I'm like, okay, so what are you working on then? Well, this is something completely different. My manager told me to do it. It has nothing to do with the big bets. They're just talking. You're right, you're missing the point. There's no direct delineation between the vision and the execution. That's what organizations that are beyond budgeting actually do. They link those things together. Experimentation. Don't try to get it right up front. Have validated learning in your organization. Check your assumptions along the way. Practice informs theory, not the other way around. Adaptability. This is a really important question. If you can ask that to your executive, I'd love to hear what he says or she says. Do you want to be right or do you want to be successful? Very often, the answer you'll get is that they want to be right. That executive knows that if they're right, they get their bonuses. But that might not be the same thing as being successful. I mean, let's think of Nokia. Let's get honest, right? What happened there is that Nokia went the Windows Phone way. They went down that path. The executives saw the data. It kept changing, saying market share is now plummeting. What he could have done at that point, Stephen Elop, was to change and say, you know what? I made a mistake. Let's go Android. Let's go something else. Let's do something different from what we're doing now, because it's obviously not working. Instead, that person said, I'm going to be right. We're going to continue the path to the point where the whole company basically was sold. Do you want to be right or do you want to be successful? Very important question. Relentless focus. Have an opinion. Invest in what matters. This is one of those things I love about Steve Jobs. You heard all those stories, but focus is something he had. You know, he would bring his executives in, the top 100 people at Apple, every year to an offsite. He'd bring them in for 2 days and he says, all right, guys, I want you just to fight it out like it's a cave match, and I want you to come up with the top 10 things we're going to do for the next year. And they would just go at it. Politics, everything would just be flying left and right. And at the end of the day, they came up with a list of 10 things. And then they would come in and say, all right, drop the bottom 7. 3 things, that's what we're doing. Now, that's focus. How many can say that, right? Relentless focus. Reject quick wins at the cost of enduring success. Don't just chase the cheap money. Don't just chase the easy revenue. Focus on what's actually important in the long run. You know, great companies do that. They're able to have a couple of bumps along the road, around the quarters, because they focus on what's important in the end. They have a vision that's compelling. You know, think of Amazon. How many quarters and years have they not been profitable, but you know they have a vision for where they're going? Think of Tesla. They're still not profitable, but people are still passionate about those products in that company because they know that electric cars are going to rule the world eventually. And they have that vision. Reject those quick wins. And ownership. Success and failure is on us. It's not about management. It's not about some other person or some other dude. It's about you. Take responsibility, take ownership, and it's on us. But feel that way too and be treated like that. That's the characteristics that you can see. And you can look around yourself and see if your organizations are doing that. So, what are some of the companies that are doing this right now? There's actually quite a few companies that are on this journey that is going beyond Agile, which is focusing on something just beyond just what we're seeing right now within traditional management. These guys are going beyond what you typically see. And a lot of these companies are mostly in Europe, and in Scandinavia I see a lot of it because that's really where Beyond Budgeting started. Handelsbanken is probably the best example. A Swedish bank, I'm not sure if you heard of it. They have done tremendous work in this area. A good example is 2008, the financial crisis. They were actually not hit that bad at all. What happened there, a lot of these loans were given to people who basically couldn't pay their loans, and that, of course, caused default for a lot of banks. Handelsbanken didn't have this problem, and the reason was that they actually gave the people at the floor, the very lowest people who were dealing with people coming in from the streets, they gave them the authority to say yay or nay when it came to these loans. And what happened is that these people actually knew each other, so they knew that this person was going to be able to pay the loan, because there was a personal relationship there. It's not just based on number crunching. Of course, you have the analysis there to help you, but at the end of the day, it was about that personal relationship. So based on that, the default rate was very, very low in Handelsbanken, and they are actually doing better than ever because of this. So they're doing this right now. So, what can you do? You're here today, you're at this awesome conference, you have a full day with all these thought leaders, your colleagues, you can learn, you can expand, you can get further, but what can you do? How can you take action? There's 3 things you can do, I think, right now, the moment you come to work on Monday. And it starts with this: educate. Educate your executives. We have done a terrible job of educating our executives when it comes to Agile. We come up with these fancy terms, XP, Scrum, Velocity, Story Points, Kanban. I mean, if you're an executive, you're just like, I don't even know what you're talking about. What? Can you give me the profit number on this? They don't care, right? This is jargon that we use, and I think it's meaningful in the right context. But for executives, we need to think beyond that. We got to speak their language. Beyond Budgeting helps us with that. So that's the first thing we got to do. We got to change our language. Expand. Expand agility beyond product management and engineering. We are too focused on just this one little piece. Agile, when you think about this as a mindset and as a philosophy, goes way beyond software development. But we got to expand the language, and we got to expand the value stream of which we can be effective. Marketing, sales, here, finance, HR. There's so much more to it to make sure the entire organization adapts to change, rather than us saying, all right, the software teams are fast and the bug counts are low. There's more to it than that. So start expanding agility. And I really recommend you do this, especially if you're in large organizations that have about 1,000 people or more. Establish a cross-functional Agile working group. An Agile working group, an AWG, is essentially a Scrum Master for the organization. It's a group of people, full-time people, who represents different parts of the organization, whose only purpose is to help expand agility across the enterprise. You can't just put a poor Scrum Master in the middle of this organization and say, go ahead, make us Agile. That's not going to work. You need someone who has the experience from finance, from HR, from engineering, from these different areas of the company, who is cross-functional, founded by the actual people who are paying the bills, so there's some support there, and let them help create an organizational improvement backlog and change the organization that way. An AWG, you need that. It's also a really good indication of whether or not your organization actually supports Agile, because it's an investment. I definitely recommend that. And check out this, BBRT. This is the Beyond Budgeting Roundtable. I'd like you to check that out when you have a chance. This is a lot of information around Beyond Budgeting, and I think that's kind of information that you're going to need as well to do that. So, this is the point of my talk, and I think something that you will hear throughout this day. Agile by itself is not agility. We have to think bigger than that. We got to think beyond Agile. So listen to your colleagues. Think about the things they're doing, not just the tools, but the mindsets, other authors that they're looking at. What are they reading? What are they thinking about? Who are they connecting with? Those kind of things are going to matter a lot to you. And that's my talk today. These are the sources that you can get. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here, and I'll ask you some questions later on if you want that too. And let's go beyond Agile. Yes, very nice. Thank you so much.